Throughout your journey, you've been working with a lot of large companies on strategy and just helping with their open source transformation. What would you say have been the biggest challenge to accomplish?
Each company was different in its own way. When you're creating products based on open source, like SGI and Wind River, it's selling open source based products. And then you have companies like SanDisk, where you had to acknowledge that for your hardware products to succeed, your open source ecosystem needed to be ready to support, what you were doing. And in the case of Comcast, it was a completely different strategy in terms of how do we show that we are a tech company and that we can advance media and entertainment through technology and not rely on just off the shelf, commercial products. So I think starting with understanding the role that open source and technology plays in your business is such an important part of the story. And often as open source people, you can come in and forget that there is a business and that is the reason for existence. And you can come in and with your evangelism about open source and say, hey, we've got to do open source because it's the right thing to do. And so you've really got to understand the context in which open source belongs in your company, how it serves the business and your customers, and then work, within that context, right? That's a big learning. And then the second learning really is that most businesses tend to view open source as risk in the beginning. And then you really need to widen their outlook to say it's not just risk, there are also opportunities in open source. And by embracing it, by knowing how to work with it, by releasing some of our own projects, we can actually create a wider opportunity for the company and the world. And then you need to learn how to work with your IP legal team and make them your friends and keep revisiting policy as the risk profile keeps changing, and to make sure that we are making it really easy for our developers and our business to work with open source. Sometimes if you just have a rigid policy set in 1998 and never revisit it, you miss out on a lot of opportunities. So I would say those are three top ones. And then I'll add a fourth one, which is you can't just consume, you've got to work with upstream communities that you're dependent upon. You've got to give, not just take. You've got to work with foundations. You can't stop at compliance. You've got to go beyond compliance and actually engage and be a part of the communities that you're involved in. I mean, with proprietary software, we often have relationships with vendors who supply those products, right? And yet, sometimes with open source, we just consume and never look back. And we have to establish relationships with especially big dependencies and be a part of the solution and not just be a passive consumer.